Hello and welcome to Psychological Insights. When we think of what human emotion binds us to another human being, the first word that comes to mind is love. And love indeed is the emotion that binds us to our most dependent relationships, that of our children or our pet. In fact, love is part of that construct. But what about the relationships that we choose? Our husbands, our wives, our spouses, our partnerships, our friendships. What happens to that love? A little betrayal, a few lies, and poof, the love is gone. Why? Today, we're going to be speaking to Dr. Robert Hamm. He's a psychologist in West Hartford Center. The topic of the day is trust. I'm Pat Kazakoff. Stay with me. Hello, Dr. Hamm.
Hi, Pat.
So we're talking about trust, and the first relationship that I mentioned in my intro was that primal relationship between the parent and the child. But that changes also.
As a child grows into adulthood? Oh, of course, yes.
Right. And he becomes less dependent.
Yes. I think that when we think about the bond between human beings or any animal creature for that matter, that we think of love, of course. But when there's a degree of vulnerability or dependency, such as children in relation to their parents when they're young, not when they're adults, of course, uh, there's an element of risk or vulnerability. And so love is not so easily achieved. There has to be something that creates a foundation where you believe that that love is something that you can rely on, and that's trust.
So what happens, I mentioned the second part of the discussion was about those relationships that you choose. You choose your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partnership, your friendships, and somehow that life, that love goes. Why does it go?
Do you have a few hours to talk about that?
I don't have a few hours, but I do have experience. I have a lot of experience.
Well, welcome to the club.
I have experience with love, like flying away.
Yes.
And most of it is based on a few little lies, a few betrayals, perhaps unmet expectations.
Yes,
But
disappointments.
why should it be so vulnerable?
But it is by definition. I mean, I think that any time that you have a relationship, that any kind of relationship, unless it's something that where it's a guarantee, and you're not dependent on someone in any one way or another, and there are very few relationships like that. When you're married, it's a partnership. You depend on your partner to be honest and to be faithful and reliable. But that's trust. That's not a guarantee. So any relationship entails some degree of risk. I mean, we have just so much control over other people, don't we? We don't have much control over. We can control ourselves as best we can. So there's risk.
So what about the trust factor? Like, where does trust come from? Like, why are some people, why am I more trustworthy and why is someone else less trustworthy? What goes into that?
Uh, well, um, we don't know that. That's something that takes time to get to know about a person. Uh, and sometimes we don't even know ourselves well enough. So we find ourselves falling short of our expectations of ourselves. We're not always honest as we'd like to be. We're not always as reliable as we'd like to be. Um, it has something to do, I think, with character. In terms of trustworthiness. Are we trustworthy as individuals? What Freud called the superego. It's part of our what we are acculturated into, socialized to become. It's an ideal. But in reality, as you know, we're not all entirely 100% trustworthy. Not just your partner, your husband, your girlfriend or whatnot, but you yourself are, less than perfect.
Well, given that I'm less than perfect, thank you for sharing that with me, because I might not have known that, but thank you for telling me,
Well,
and I trust you.
I've been meaning to have a talk with you about that. Just teasing.
um, so what about that? Where does that trustworthiness come from? Because what I'm hearing from you, it's on a scale. There's more trustworthy, less trustworthy, and it's on a graph, it's on a time frame. But what makes me trustworthy? Like, well, how do I
Um,
develop that feeling that I trust people, they trust me? Where do I get that from?
well, again, that comes from our superego, so to speak, and that structure of the mind that Freud talked about. It's how we are cultured. It's what our parents teach us. How you are socialized. Are you punished for your misdeeds, for your dishonesties, for your transgressions? There are laws in society. There are consequences. And then we have ideals that we want to live up to. Well, we want to be like this one and that one, the good guys with the white hats. There are payoffs for being good and trustworthy. But ultimately, we want to be trustworthy because we know if we want other people to be trustworthy to us, if we want to have relationships with people who are good to us, we've got to be good to them. That's when we get older, that's the realization that we come to. We're not governed by a fear of punishment or rewards directly, but there's an insight that we gain through our mistakes, our transgressions, that it's a two-way street.
What about the expression good enough mothering? That's from a British psychoanalyst, I think David Woods Endicott. Am I correct?
Uh, Donald Woods Winnicott. Yeah,
I'm not bad. I'm
not
not
too
bad.
bad.
I'm pretty close.
Yeah, not too bad.
What is that about? I hadn't heard that expression, good enough mothering.
Yeah,
What is
I mean, it's just, yeah, I wouldn't expect you to have. It's a expression used by people in psychoanalysis, but I always like that term. It's very sort of straightforward and usable, understandable. It means that our ability to trust, our ability to bond with other people originates, as the analysts say, and there's a lot of validity to this, of course, from our relationships early in life, in infancy, between the caretaker and the infant, um, and a mother. In order for a good bond, a secure bond to develop, the mother has to be reliable. Obviously, the mother has to be responsive to the baby's needs. If the child is hungry, or needs comforting or whatever, um, there has to be a caretaker who is responsive to that. So we develop trust right from the beginning of life in with the knowledge that we learn that our environment is going to be responsive to our needs. And of course, who is that? Who's elected? Mom, the
Yeah,
caretaker.
I take a little umbrage to that, because in all these discussions I've had, it's always about the mother.
Always about the mother.
Where is the father in this? Where is somebody else? Where is human nature? Why is it always the mother who's at
Well,
fault?
it doesn't have to be the mother. I mean, conceivably, I mean, there could be a male who serves, as a proxy, or it could be a governess, and there could be someone who is, but it's the primary caretaker then. If it isn't the mother, it's just that's traditional biology generally, but it doesn't have to be. But
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm appreciative of you
okay,
giving me that.
but good enough mothering is a nice phrase, I think, because it means you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be good enough for the child to develop a sense that its environment, its caretaker is reliable and responsive, empathic, it's going to be able to meet its needs. But but that also entails that the caretaker grants that the child has to grow up into an autonomous creature, and therefore has to allow the child to develop a sense of independence and mastery,
So,
and not be hovering all the time.
so what happens if the child doesn't develop, like doesn't, fails to, that trust fails to form in early childhood? What are the consequences of that? You just don't
Well,
have a mother who is that responsive. People have problems. I mean, we come from an environment right after the war. There's people who survived the war. Their mothers, their fathers, they're doing the best they can. So
yeah.
what happens with those people who don't have a strong trust relationship? What are the consequences for them?
Well, it really depends on a person's temperament, constitution, the nature of that relationship. So John Bowlby, who was a psychoanalyst back in the 50s, wrote books on attachment, and that's where attachment theory came from. Came out of object relations theory and psychoanalysis. Um, and so, different theorists in psychology have talked about attachment styles. When there's not a secure bond between the caretaker and the child. So you can develop what's called an anxious attachment pattern, personality style.
What
Where
does
you're
that
very,
mean? What does that
it
mean?
means that you're going to be insecure, very clingy and nervous and anxious about your attachments, maybe obsessive, um, very easily made jealous, things like that nature. That's one. So that's one style. But there are other styles. There's one of the avoidant attachment pattern. So if you don't have a reliable caretaker, um, or one that's not there very much, you learn how to fend for yourself. You become avoidant and detached. So you don't rely on other people, but you're hard to penetrate. You don't share your emotions. You're cold. You can be distant, not sufficiently empathic. So that's the avoidant. Or another attachment pattern is the ambivalent, uh, where you seek closeness, but on the other hand, when you do get close to somebody, you get scared, and so you push them away, and it's kind of you're giving mixed signals. So there are different kinds of dysfunctional attachment patterns that can arise and become sort of, part of your personality if there's not a good, secure attachment relationship early in life.
Well, this is pretty serious consequences you're talking about because it has implications for the rest of your life as
Again,
far as as far as forming relationships uh, is as far as forming relationships. So what do you do to combat that? Because at a certain point, you're an adult, you realize that you're having a problem with relationships. Like, what do you do?
well, I mean, this is where either if you, some people learn from their mistakes, but many people don't. They make the same, as you know, Pat, make the same mistakes over and over again, and they're confused. Why is that? Um, so when you can't find your way on your own, that's what people like myself, come in. You have a professional, um, a third party who's been trained to help identify these kinds of patterns and help the patient get insight and then learn the skills to navigate relationships more successfully.
So what about the people? I'm interested in the people who are successful. Uh, I mean, I understand the consequences of people without a trust bond early on, but what about people who don't have a trust bond early on, but they become successful people in relationships, in their marriages, in their work, in their relationships with people? How do those people figure it out? Are they a majority? Are they a minority? Like, what's more important, the nurture or the nature of the person in this situation?
So did you say these are people, you're asking about people who have insecure attachments in childhood, but then they turn out healthy?
Right. How
Okay.
does, like, why? Why are those people healthy?
That's a good question. There's been quite a bit of research done on that. How is it that some children who've had very bad childhood environments end up tragically, which makes sense, or those who are become successful in spite of that? Um, well, first of all, those who are successful, it depends on how you define success. So if you're defining success as something that's monetary, that they, were successful in their careers, it doesn't necessarily generalize to their personal lives.
What I'm talking about here is not monetary. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
just talking about our topic at hand,
yeah. No,
which
I understand. So I'm just using that as an example. So I think sometimes when people say, "Well, how did they?" Well, it depends on how you define success. But yes, what I was going to say is that some people, they are able to overcome adversity in their childhood. And so a lot of research has been done on that. Why is that? What separates the successful from the not so successful children who come from bad backgrounds? And what they have found is that often, even though they've been failed by a parent or both parents, that someone came in. It could be an uncle, it could be a teacher, it could be a grandparent, and served as sort of like a substitute mentor or caretaker parent figure that they bonded with and helped guide them uh, as a parent would. Um, so that so even though it seems as though, well, it just was that child on their own, no, there usually was it was kind of fortuitous, if you will, that there was someone who filled that vacuum. Uh, Certainly, the research shows that if you have one parent who's unreliable, but the other is, you do much better, obviously, than if both parents aren't.
well, so what I'm hearing from you is, well, finally you introduced the other parent. I'm really happy about that, that there was someone else except the mother who was, who was to blame. But and you also mentioned the fact that some of those people have mentors outside the family, the school, somebody notices them. But
Yeah.
what about the people who don't have a mentor relationship? They're just out on their own. Perhaps they're successful in school, perhaps they're successful in sports,
Mhm.
but they don't have a mentor relationship. How do those people get out of this sort of dysfunctional mode? Because they only know one way of handling themselves.
I don't know. In answer to I don't know how to answer that question with certainty. All I can say, Pat, is that if someone turns out well in terms of their ability to establish good bonds, um, there's a certain degree of luck involved. If you haven't had good parents, you've had a very bad childhood, there has to be some degree of luck there that you found somebody. It could be a spouse or a friend who really is very reliable um, because you don't have that template from your childhood to guide you. And you don't learn that just out of the clear blue sky. It's not something you're born with. uh, it's something you become socialized into. The ability to learn how to navigate a relationship and how to discern trustworthiness in another person and how to stand up for yourself and that's very complicated. Very complicated
I,
thing.
I, I think the answer that I'm looking for, which is like not a real clever answer, but it's what's in my mind is that I'm looking for the word resiliency. And I'm looking for you to say to me that people are born with a certain amount of resiliency and nobody knows where that comes from.
Yeah, well, yes, but in answer to the to get to the topic that we're talking about here, and that is human relationships, the glue that bonds, trust. It's more than resiliency. There has to be experience in relationships that gives you the ability to learn to trust and learn how to navigate a relationship. So Resiliency is it's an abstract term. Uh, that what does it mean, and where does that come from? Um, well, in different factors. You could say social intelligence that we're born with, but it's more than that. You have to have the experience to apply that intelligence to, and you have to have people in your life that were good, that gave you the ability to bond. You know, I don't care how intelligent you are, how resilient your genes might be, so to speak, if there is such a thing. You have to have people in your life that give you that sense that there are good people out there that you can rely on.
So, what are the principles to building a trusting relationship? What are those principles?
Thank you for asking. I have them right here. um, I have 8 principles for building a trusting relationship. Um,
And I want to ask you one more question before you go into your 8 principles.
yeah.
What about you have a trusting relationship for a long time, and then all of a sudden there's betrayals, there's lies, there's unmet expectations. How do you build from that? Like, how do you go back to the trusting relationship? And like, what do you have to do? I'm asking you that question.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. It's a very difficult, it's like the old saying goes, it takes a lifetime to build trust and just one betrayal to knock it all down. Um, it reminds me, I just saw, excuse me, I have to let my cat down. The tabloid newsfeed, Kathy Lee Gifford. I don't know if you saw it. It's hard to avoid the news. It's always in your face. And, she was betrayed by Frank, her husband, late in their marriage. And how did she, get over that? And I didn't read it, but I just read, I think, maybe a paragraph in the beginning. And my sense is what her answer was that, that there's too much to lose. But she said that, the relationship was never quite the same. So people do get over betrayals, um, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship with someone, if there's enough love and there are other children or whatnot. But that doesn't mean it's an easy thing, and it doesn't mean you entirely recover. The betrayal can, cause lasting scars. But in many instances, it's something that cannot be recovered. It can cause the breakup of a relationship.
Right. So let's go back to the 8 principles that you said that you had them in hand.
Yeah, they're right here in black and white. So one thing is, when you're meeting somebody, when you're getting to know someone, the beginning of a relationship, I see it as a dance. Some people are too closed up, keep their cards too close to their chest. Other people are too generous in sharing information. So it's a dance. You make a move, they go with you. You have to take some risks, in order to be close to somebody, obviously, but you don't just spill the beans. You don't just tell them everything and all the skeletons in your closet right off the bat. It's a graduated process of sharing. When you form a relationship, there are certain principles I think that it's important to keep in mind. One is that if you want to build trust in your relationship, you want to show your partner that you're interested, you're attentive, you want to know you're curious about who they are. Secondly, as the relationship begins to evolve, problems arise. And you want to show your partner that when problems arise, that you can make adjustments and to show that you care, as long as those adjustments are not compromising your integrity and your basic morals. Thirdly, be empathic. So it's very important that you set aside time in your relationship to listen to one another, and show that you can put yourself in that person's shoes, even if you don't agree with them. So if you have arguments, it's fine to disagree, but try to understand how your partner feels and where they're coming from. Um, Fourthly, it's very important. It goes without saying that it's important to communicate. So in my practice, so many of my couples, they say, well, my partner doesn't share. Um, it's very important that, especially men, to communicate your feelings and the things in your life rather than hold things close to your chest um, if you're in a long-term relationship. And also, this is very important to check in now and then. Where are we? Where are we going? Are we, are we on the same page in this relationship? So it's good to have those kinds of discussions periodically. It's
So
not,
what I'm hearing from you when I'm putting it all together is to really be conscious. Don't just move through life. Be conscious, be aware, make a habit of being aware, of listening more than you normally would, of sharing more than you normally would. Be conscious. That's what I'm hearing from you.
yes, that's true. I mean, when you're in an intimate relationship, that's a devotion. It's a special relationship, and it requires nurturance, and you can never take it for granted. It always needs work, and it needs tending to, and love and care. So you can't take it for granted. Otherwise, you risk losing the relationship.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, and I'm wishing that Kathy Lee Gifford was on with us today, because she would give us like real life experience, because she's out there. I've read a little bit about her,
Oh,
and
okay.
mostly what she did was go into her work. She's a
Yeah,
highly talented person. She's her own person in her own right, and
yeah.
she got a lot of love and a lot of positive reinforcement for just being Kathy Lee Gifford. And that sort of pushed her ahead, because I read that article too.
Oh, is that right? Oh, okay.
Yes,
Oh,
but
yeah,
she
I did not. You said two. I didn't read the article. I just saw the headline and read the first, I think, few sentences. But yeah, that's a very good point. I'm glad you raised that because when in building trust, there's a writer back in the 70s, Sidney Girard, a psychologist who wrote a book called The Transparent Self, and talks about how important it is in developing a relationship with intimacy. It's important to be transparent. And in order to be transparent, you really need to know who you are. So in order to be a good partner, you have to have a good relationship with yourself. And so with Kathleen Lee Gifford, the point you're making is it's important that you have a life, a sense of identity, and give value to yourself that's separate from the relationship, especially because when things go awry in a relationship, that you have something that to rely on.
well, to really, I mean, to be very blunt, to fall back on.
But
That
also,
that
it, it,
you're not totally dependent.
but it's more than that. What I was going to say is that also it's important to learn how to be a friend for yourself and to spend time alone so that you look at yourself and know yourself so that you understand who you are. It makes you a better partner in navigating a relationship. So that when your partner points out your faults or you get into problems, you're not always deflecting. And that helps you to be a more reliable partner, trustworthy. When your partner, when there are conflicts, they don't feel that you're constantly blaming or eschewing responsibility. So that brings me to the next point in the eight principles, to accept responsibility. If you want your partner to trust you, you want to show them that they are with someone who is able to accept and look at themselves and their contributions to the problems in the relationship. And finally, be loyal and reliable. When you make promises, you make good on those promises. They go a long way. And to be supportive to your partner. Even you don't have to agree about everything, But it's important that they know that when the chips are down, that you're with them. You have their back, or
Dr.
they have your back.
Well put, Dr. Hamm, but I'd like to meet this person. I'd like to have a relationship with this person that you're describing because I have yet to meet them. But it's, you know what, it's just difficult being a human being. That's what I'm hearing. It's really, really difficult being a human being, being nurturing, being attentive, and earning a living at the same time, and dealing with children and dealing with the environment. I mean, we're in the middle now of the COVID-19. It doesn't make things easier. It makes things harder.
We're all works in progress, Pat, aren't we?
Yes. Well, Dr. Hamm, do we have a topic for next month or not yet?
Yeah, I think I'm formulating something. Yeah.
You want to share it?
It's going to be on vampires.
Okay. What can I say to that? But I'm looking forward to the talk on vampires. So thank you very much, Dr. Hamm. We'll see you next month. And I'm Pat Kazakoff, and thank you for tuning in. You're tuning in to West Hartford Community Interactive. Thank you.